Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we're going to be talking about Clue on the SNES. This is a really fun board game, even if it does kind of devolve into just a shouting match, much like this one.
We're trying to find out who killed him, and where, and with what.
There's no need to shout.
I'm not shouting! All right, I am. I'm shouting!
In the game and in the board game, there's no real story or introduction of who these characters are or why they're in this mansion. So, in order to get around that a little bit, I'm going to let the movie introduce all the characters to you.
I'm sorry. Professor Plum, you were once a professor of psychiatry, specializing in helping paranoid and homicidal lunatics suffering from delusions of grandeur.
Yes, but now I work for the United Nations.
So your work has not changed. But you don't practice medicine at the UN. His license to practice has been lifted, correct?
Why? What did he do?
You know what doctors aren't allowed to do with their lady patients?
Yeah?
Well, he did.
Oh, how...
Are you making moral judgments, Mrs. Peacock? How then do you justify taking bribes in return for delivering your husband, Senator Peacock's vote to certain lobbyists?
My husband is a paid consultant. There is nothing wrong with that.
Not if it's publicly declared, perhaps. But if the payment is delivered by slipping used greenbacks in plain envelopes under the door of the men's room, how would you describe that transaction?
I'd say it stinks.
Oh, how would you know? When were you in that men's room?
So it's true.
No, it's a vicious lie.
I'm sure we're all glad to hear that. Me too.
And me.
Not me.
You're not being blackmailed?
Oh, I'm being blackmailed, all right. But I did what I'm being blackmailed for.
What did you do?
Well, to be perfectly frank, I run a specialized hotel and a telephone service which provide gentlemen with the company of a young lady for a short while.
Oh, yeah? What's the phone number?
So how did you know Colonel Mustard works in Washington? Is he one of your clients?
Certainly not.
I was asking Miss Scarlett.
Well, you tell him it's not true.
It's not true.
Is that true?
No, it's not true.
Ha-ha, so it is true.
A double negative. Double negative? You mean you have photographs?
That sounds like a confession to me. In fact, the double negative has led to proof positive. I'm afraid you gave yourself away.
Are you trying to make me look stupid in front of the other guests?
Don't need any help from me, sir.
That's right.
Mrs. White, you've been paying our friend the blackmailer ever since your husband died under, shall we say, mysterious circumstances.
Why are you paying the blackmailer?
I don't want a scandal, do I? We had had a very humiliating public confrontation. He was deranged. He was lunatic. He didn't actually seem to like me very much. He had threatened to kill me in public.
Why would he want to kill you in public?
I think she meant he threatened in public to kill her.
Oh. Was that his final word on the matter?
Being killed is pretty final, wouldn't you say?
But he was your second husband. Your first husband also disappeared.
But that was his job. He was an illusionist.
But he never reappeared.
He wasn't a very good illusionist.
I have something to say. I'm not going to wait for Wadsworth here to unmask me. I work for the State Department, and I'm a homosexual.
So there you have it. You've got all of the main characters, and you know that they're all being blackmailed by Mr. Body, also known as Dr. Black in some versions of the game. So the main characters are Professor Plum, Colonel Mustard, Mr. Green, Mrs. White, Miss Scarlet, and Miss Peacock. They're all being blackmailed, so yeah, they each have a motive for killing Mr. Body. And Mr. Body introduces all the weapons, the lead pipe, the wrench, the dagger, the revolver, the candlestick, and the rope. So let's talk a little bit more about the game now that we kind of have a good idea of what's going on. So the gameplay for Clue is pretty straightforward. You're just rolling a dice and moving your piece around a board until it gets into a room. Then you can give your idea of what happened. The different rooms are the hall, the library, the study, the kitchen, billiard room, lounge, ballroom, dining room, and conservatory. The lounge and the conservatory are connected by a secret passage, and the kitchen and the study are connected by a secret passage. As I mentioned, you've got 6 weapons that you can choose from: candlestick, knife, revolver, lead pipe, rope, and wrench. These are all represented by cards: the characters, the rooms, and also the weapons. When you start the game, assuming that you're playing with 6 players, everybody gets dealt 3 cards. These are kind of your evidence. They basically tell you who didn't do it and what room it didn't happen in, and also what weapon wasn't used. It is possible to get 2 rooms or 3 rooms, any combination of those cards. The gameplay kind of devolves into just randomly guessing at different things, and if you're paying attention, the game does give you clues as to what the right answer is. Once you get into a room, you can do a few actions. You can make a suggestion as to what happened, you can interrogate one of the suspects, or you can make an accusation as to what happened. The suggestion is just you throwing out an idea. You can do that in any way you want. And if you get something wrong, the game will tell you, like, the wrench wasn't in this room, or this person wasn't in this room, so that suggestion doesn't work. You also get people, once you make, like, an interrogation or something, or you make an accusation, someone will chime in and say, I know it wasn't this person, I've got proof that says it wasn't them, or I know it didn't happen in this room. All of those play out in little cutscenes that look pretty good. So these games can be really short. There was one, I think it was the first or second one I played while I was recording this. It wrapped up really fast, like in 3 or 4 minutes it was done. It's crazy the way that happens. Whenever you make a suggestion, it automatically teleports the person you're accusing to that specific room. And then those people can make their own suggestions. So if someone is interrogating somebody and they have the right room and the right person and the right weapon, then their turn's over and it goes to that person that they've accused. The person who's been accused can then solve the riddle. So you get some funny moments where somebody who is the murderer basically wins the game by saying that they did it, and you get a funny little cutscene that explains, yes, this person is the murderer, and also solved the crime and turned themselves into the police. It's kind of hilarious how that happens sometimes, but it's just one of the weird quirks of a board game like this. Clue looks really good. There really isn't too much to say aside from this. It is just a board game after all, so you don't have some amazing graphics or animation or anything. The cutscenes are what really kind of carries this. They're very well done. Everything in this looks really nice, but the cutscenes look especially good. The endings should have been much better. The way it is now, the game just kind of stops, and you don't really know if you won or if you lost. It just shows up that the game is over. The only thing that would tell you who won is the person getting the last word at the end. So it might be the person who did the crime, they get the last word, then they won. Or one of the other characters might get it. But then the screen just says game over and you have to start all over again. It would have been nice if the programmer put in Miss Scarlet won, or Mr. Green won, or Professor Plum won, or something else to kind of indicate, yes, this person won. Now you need to restart the game if you want to keep playing. The only thing you get is just game over. It's like, oh, okay, great. That's kind of one of the stranger end screens. It isn't like hilariously bad or anything. It's just sort of like, oh, okay. Like the game was sick of playing itself or something like that. Overall, I think the graphics are pretty good. They get the job done, and they show how close you're getting to actually beating the game, or how close someone else is to beating the game. It's a really nice looking game, but yeah, you shouldn't really be expecting anything amazing when you're reviewing a board game, I guess. I oddly like this genre of video games. I don't know what it is about board games that get turned into video games that I just really enjoy. But yeah, they're a lot of fun. The fact that they can just kind of end abruptly, like with Clue, is a little weird. But yeah, they can be a lot of fun to play. It's also really interesting to see what the developers do with the game. If they just bring it straight over without adding anything special to it like they did here, or if they do something a little bit different like with Risk, where they added in all the cutscenes and like the battle imagery. They made it so you could kind of control the battles in some ways, and they tried a little bit extra with that game. With Clue, they just kind of brought the board game onto a video game cartridge, and it worked pretty well. They added in a lot of cutscenes which explain what's going on. They added in the animations. They gave you visual clues to let you know what's happening. It's pretty fun, but yeah, it can get wrapped up really fast, which is a little bit disheartening when you play this game every once in a while. I do like that your player character can be the killer, so you're playing as the murderer, but you don't actually know it. I think that's really fun. Like, that's very just really interesting, and I'm glad they kept that in there, because sometimes you don't know that you did it until someone guesses, and you look at the cards and you find out, hey, yep, you did it. It's still a game that in some ways needs like a piece of paper to keep track of everything, which brings it closer to the board game, but I would have liked to have seen something which kept track of what was going on a little bit better. Even though the game does end very quickly sometimes. In other games, it can go on for a while, and it can get a little bit confusing until you really pay attention to the fact that the computer characters are all guessing the same thing in some ways. Clue is one of those board games that kind of needed something added to it to become better than what it is. The developers were a bit too faithful to the original game, in my opinion. I'm not really sure what they could have added, but there should have been something else to this, like more game modes or something could have been added here, instead of just directly taking the only game mode from the board game and saying, here you go, now it's a video game. They did add all the cutscenes, and they added a lot to it to kind of show you what's happening, but I felt like there could have been some other game mode added in, like maybe more than one killer or something like that, or maybe adding in like a story or something to kind of sink your teeth into. That probably was outside of the scope of what they wanted to do, and there's most likely a decent chance they just wanted to get this one done and move on to something else. And you can see how much work they really put into it with the cutscenes and the art and everything. So it looks really great, but it can be kind of short. I do have a bunch of other... Well, I have one other version of Clue, but then I have a bunch of other board games that have been turned into video games. And I'll take a look at those at some point. I kind of like these. They're sort of like a guilty pleasure for me, especially all the fond memories I have of playing Risk on the Sega Genesis. I'm not really expecting too much from them, but every once in a while you can be surprised with what the developers did with the game. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.
Who would want to kill the cook?
Dinner wasn't that bad.
How can you make jokes at a time like this?
It's my defense mechanism.
Some defense. If I was the killer, I would kill you next.
Oh?
I said if. If.